a newly elected American president wants to take our jobs for Americans. We understand why Donald Trump wants to take Canadian jobs, but why does this Prime Minister want to help him? To let Trump impose softwood lumber tariffs that Biden has now doubled. But you know what is dumber and dumbest of all? Imposing a 61 cent a liter carbon tax. Another terrible tragedy. As they laugh, 1,200 workers at the Ingersoll Cami plant learned that they would lose their jobs after that Prime Minister promised he would negotiate a win and that he would keep their jobs here in Canada. They join with 2,000 workers in Brampton, many more in Oshawa.
I'll tell you how the Prime Minister will deal with the auto sector. He will look at the auto workers in the eyes and he will say, "We will fight for your job."
They said trade wars were over. They said Trump would take a softer approach this time. But when the cameras rolled and microphones caught the tension, Canada's Foreign Minister Mélanie Joly looked straight into the lens and delivered what could only be described as a diplomatic knockout. This wasn't just another disagreement between neighbors. It was a breaking point. It was the moment America's closest ally stood up and said, "We won't be bullied anymore." Across Washington, Trump's team was stunned. Advisors whispered behind closed doors, trade experts scrambled for statements, and the White House press room fell silent as Mélanie Joly's sharp words went viral across the globe. What started as routine negotiations between two countries deeply connected by history and trade had now spiraled into a full-blown standoff that could reshape the future of North American economics. It all began when Donald Trump suddenly terminated trade talks with Canada, claiming Ottawa was too difficult to negotiate with. Within hours, markets trembled. The Dow slipped, investors grew uneasy, and American farmers, many of whom had once cheered Trump's tough stance on trade, started to question whether their own livelihoods were now at risk. Multiple reports from The Guardian, The Globe and Mail, and Global News confirmed what insiders had feared for weeks. Negotiations were collapsing behind closed doors. Trump's team was pushing for a deal that heavily favored American manufacturers, especially in the steel, aluminum, and dairy sectors. But Canada refused to bend. According to sources close to Ottawa, Joly, with full backing from Prime Minister Mark Carney, made it clear that Canada would not be cornered into submission. The tone inside those meetings was tense, cold, and deliberate. Every time the U.S. side demanded deeper concessions, Joly repeated the same principle: trade must be fair, not forced. When Trump was informed about Canada's pushback, he was reportedly furious. In a White House press appearance the next morning, he lashed out, calling Canada impossible to work with and accusing Ottawa of taking advantage of America for decades. But this time, Canada did not stay quiet. Within hours, Mélanie Joly fired back with a simple but powerful message. "Canada does not negotiate under threats," she said. "We will always stand for our industries, our workers, and our sovereignty."
I'll tell you how the Prime Minister will deal with the auto sector. He will look at the auto workers in the eyes and he will say, "We will fight for your job." That's exactly what we're doing. Every single day, we're negotiating back in Washington, but also, this is important to say, that I met this morning with the Canadian CEO of GM. I was in conversation with the head of the labor union of Unifor, and I also talked to Doug Ford, and I talked to Vic Fideli.
That single statement hit like a thunderclap across social media. Within 24 hours, millions had viewed the clip. Hashtags like #StandWithCanada, #TradeShowdown, and #Carney versus Trump began trending on both sides of the border. For many Canadians, it was a moment of pride, a reminder that their country was no longer content to play the role of America's quiet neighbor. Meanwhile, Trump's aides were caught off guard. They hadn't expected such a sharp, coordinated pushback from Ottawa. Senior officials scrambled to contain the fallout, but the damage was already done. Washington looked defensive, and Canada looked strong. Trump's re-election campaign had been built on the promise of bringing jobs home and protecting American industries. But analysts pointed out that his aggressive stance toward Canada could easily backfire. The US and Canada share one of the largest trading relationships in the world. Over $900 billion in goods and services cross their borders each year. From auto parts to agriculture, from energy to lumber, both economies are deeply intertwined. If Trump were to impose new tariffs on Canadian goods, it wouldn't just hurt Canada. It would send shockwaves through America's own industries. American farmers, small manufacturers, and even consumers would face higher costs and fewer export opportunities. It's the same domino effect that unfolded during Trump's first trade war in 2018. And Canada hasn't forgotten. Now, under the leadership of Mark Carney and Melanie Joly, Canada has made it clear it won't be caught unprepared again. Ottawa has already begun forging deeper trade partnerships with Asia and Europe to reduce its reliance on the US. This new Canada-first approach could reshape not just trade, but global alliances. Inside the White House, the atmosphere grew tense. According to reports, Trump's economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, described the situation as a challenge that could turn into a crisis. Republican Senator Marco Rubio went on television to defend Trump, saying Canada had been difficult to negotiate with, which only fueled more anger north of the border. Canadian journalists and politicians criticized the remark as arrogant and condescending, proof that Washington still underestimated how much leverage Ottawa actually held. Because today's Canada is not the Canada of a decade ago. Its economy is stronger, more diversified, and more independent. Under Carney's leadership, the country has positioned itself as a global hub for clean energy, rare minerals, and technology. Resources that the US desperately needs. As the diplomatic dust settled, world leaders began to react. In Europe, analysts warned that Trump's decision to abruptly end talks with a key ally would further isolate the US on the global stage. Asian markets shifted cautiously, and even Beijing made a rare public comment, calling the move another sign of US instability. In Ottawa, the mood was one of restrained triumph. Canadian newspapers praised Joly's defiance as measured, principled, and long overdue. One columnist wrote, "For once, Canada didn't just respond, it led." Trump, however, remained combative. In a campaign rally days later, he told supporters, "If Canada wants to play hardball, we can play harder." The crowd cheered, but behind the scenes, officials worried the president's rhetoric could escalate into another full trade war, one the US might not win this time. Political analysts argue that Trump's biggest misstep wasn't walking away from the table. It was underestimating how that would be perceived globally. By exiting the talks, he handed Canada the moral high ground. It made Ottawa appear like the adult in the room, steady, reasonable, and unwilling to be pushed around. Mark Carney, a former central banker with deep ties in international finance, knows the power of perception. He understands that confidence, not just economics, drives trade. If investors begin to view Canada as the more stable, reliable partner, capital will flow northward and American exports could suffer. As one economist put it bluntly, Trump may have won the headline, but Canada just won the narrative. And that narrative has consequences. In rural America, where Trump's political base lives, farmers are growing anxious. Many rely on Canada as their largest export market for crops like corn, soybeans, and dairy products. They've been through this before. When Trump imposed tariffs on China and Canada in 2018, it triggered retaliation that devastated small family farms. Subsidies helped for a while, but not enough. Now, history seems to be repeating itself. One farmer in Iowa told Global News, "We voted for Trump because we wanted fair trade, not no trade." That sentiment, quiet but powerful, is spreading across the heartland. While Trump is focused on political victories, Canada is playing the long game. Ottawa is quietly strengthening ties with partners in Japan, South Korea, and India. Deals are being discussed that could secure more reliable export markets for Canadian products, from energy to agriculture. Melanie Joly, for her part, continues to lead with calm determination. She told reporters, "Canada is open to dialogue but not under duress. The world has changed, and so has Canada." It was a statement that resonated not just in Canada, but across the global diplomatic community. What's unfolding now is not merely a trade dispute. It's a symbolic struggle over respect and equality between nations that have long seen themselves as brothers. For decades, the U.S. has held the upper hand in negotiations, often expecting allies to follow its lead. But the geopolitical landscape is changing fast. Nations once reliant on Washington are diversifying, forming alliances that reduce their dependence on American leadership. Even European officials quietly admit it. One diplomat told reporters off record, "The age of American leverage is ending. Nations are learning to say no, and perhaps no one has said it louder, or more gracefully, than Melanie Joly." Trump's decision to walk away from talks may seem like strength on the surface, but in reality, it could mark a turning point. One where America's closest ally finally asserts its independence. Canada didn't just defend itself economically, it defended its dignity. The image of Joly, standing firm and composed as Trump's administration lashed out, has become symbolic of a broader shift in global power. Canada's message is clear. Cooperation is possible, but submission is not. And now, as both nations watch each other across the world's longest border, a silent question lingers. Who will blink first? Because one thing is certain. If Trump thought Canada would bow to pressure, he underestimated a country that's learned to survive every political storm by standing tall and staying calm. Canada is no longer the junior partner in North America. It's an equal player. And this trade standoff just made sure the world knows it.